The control you believe you have over your own life is, more often than not, merely a reflex conditioned by the gaze of others. The illusion of stability is nothing more than an invisible agreement, sustained by its predictability. This is where the first fissure appears. If no one can hold you back, break you, or stop you, why do you still move in response to external noise? Doubt settles like a shadow. Perhaps what you call autonomy is merely the trained reflex of a puppet that hasn't yet cut its strings. The hidden mechanism is simple, cruel, and silent. Others become accustomed to anticipating your gestures, words, and reactions. They know that if they poke you, you'll speak. If they challenge you, you'll explain. If they ignore you, you'll seek attention. This conditioning is more powerful than any physical handcuff because it's voluntary. You offer the key to your control whenever you try to prove something, whenever you rush to clarify, whenever you seek to be understood. And in this act, you lose the little sovereignty you thought you possessed. Machiavelli didn't say that power was merely action, but that the perception of power was often more decisive than the force itself. If you portray yourself as predictable, malleable, eager to be accepted, you've already undermined yourself. Anyone reading this doesn't see you as a threat, but as a useful asset. The fragility of those seeking validation is precisely what makes them manipulable. The price of being too transparent is becoming disposable. The dismantling of innocence begins when you realize that explaining yourself is always an act of submission. Every time you open your mouth to justify a choice, you also open yourself up to being interpreted, distorted, and demeaned. Silence is more than the absence of sound. It's the refusal to dance to the tune someone else has imposed. Distance is more than physical absence. It's the refusal to be predictable. Rarity is more than constant absence. It's the creation of a void that others can't fill without you. And unpredictability is more than spontaneity. It's the weapon that makes others insecure because they don't know which version of you they'll find before them. In a professional environment, the difference between being led and leading becomes apparent in meetings, when everyone expects you to rush to defend yourself in the face of criticism. If you don't give in, if you just observe, the pressure shifts back to the attacker. Prolonged silence creates discomfort and forces others to fill the void. In this moment, power shifts without you having to utter a word. The same applies to public indirect comments. If you respond, you confirm the intention of the attack. If you ignore, you disarm the aggressor because their game loses its meaning. Political credit always belongs to those who expose themselves less and remain enigmatic. In the relational sphere, tests appear disguised as provocations. Someone pokes you to gauge your reaction, hoping you'll get agitated, irritated, or prove something. But if you remain calm, respond coolly, or better yet, let the provocation hang in the air without addressing it, the power shifts. Absence is also a sanction. There's no need for shouting, warnings, or drama. Simply not being where the other person expects you to be, and their mind takes charge of punishing itself with doubts. The real impact lies in creating the space where the other person loses themselves in their own anxiety. In the digital realm, the court of public opinion thrives on reactions. Those who overreact become predictable, fragile, and an easy target. Labels only stick to those who defend themselves against them. Those who don't recognize them, who maintain an aura of indifference, destroy the game from the ground up. Sustained silence exposes noise as noise. An unanswered attack becomes empty. An ignored label dies at its source. By reframing the game through your absence, you become unreadable. Tactical tools are not just concepts, but precision blades. Calibrated silence prevents the other person from knowing how much they've affected you. Non-reaction disarms expectations. Calculated indifference creates insecurity in those who need your validation. Presence, when rare, acquires symbolic weight. Pauses, when well applied, transform any ordinary sentence into a final sentence. Mirroring allows you to extract information without exposing yourself, and redirection changes the direction of an attack without having to face it head-on. Strategic disappearance cuts through addictions. An aura of unpredictability keeps the other person constantly alert, and when necessary, a precision cut ends an emotional game with a short, non-repeatable sentence. Inner metamorphosis begins in the fortress you silently build. The discipline of not reacting is harder than the discipline of acting. Sustained tension is what separates the strong from the fragile. The urge to prove something, to seek validation, to respond immediately, is the conditioned mind's most costly addiction. When you overcome it, you realize how trapped you were before. Sovereignty is not giving in to reflexes, not surrendering your energy to the first external stimulus. Strategic solitude is inevitable, because few can tolerate the absence of explanations. But in the void you create, clarity is born. In the space where you refuse to be predictable, power is born. This is the first step, understanding that freedom begins when you decide to no longer be conditioned by reflexes, that no one can hold you back, break you, or stop you, not because you are physically invincible, but because you are psychologically unreadable. The next step is to transform this realization into concrete practice, into a presence that destabilizes, a silence that commands, and an indifference that imprisons others in their own need. And it is in this transition that darkness begins to become an advantage. The burden of always being accessible is greater than most admit. You haven't yet realized how much each quick response, each immediate explanation, and each attempt to prove something diminishes you in the eyes of others. It's in this detail that the true capture mechanism lies hidden, the anxiety of not leaving spaces open. But absence is the weapon the weak never dare wield. Those who sustain emptiness become unattainable. The hidden mechanism here is the collective dependence on predictability. People can't stand gray areas. They want guarantees, they want predictions. They want you to behave as you always have. If you break this pattern, the structure crumbles. The discomfort you cause is proportional to the level of control you begin to gain. It's as if suddenly, the smoothly turning gears are stopped by your refusal to react. Friction exposes those who have depended too much on your predictability. The dismantling of innocence reveals itself the moment you understand that transparency is not a virtue, but a weakness. You've been trained to believe that absolute honesty is synonymous with moral strength. But in power games, being completely legible means laying yourself bare before predators. Those who know exactly what you feel, desire, and fear hold a manual on how to break you. True power lies in saying little, showing less, and letting others fill the void with their own projections. At work, this practice is devastating. When everyone is accustomed to your readiness to respond, a calculated pause is all it takes to turn the tables. Public criticism loses its power if you don't respond. Silence restores the aggressor's expectations. If the environment expects detailed explanations and you respond with short sentences, the tension builds in others, not in you. An enigmatic presence in meetings, without the need to fill every space with justifications, turns you into a point of reference. Those who speak less, paradoxically, carry more weight. In personal relationships, the game is even more visceral. Those who don't allow themselves to be measured, who don't react to provocations, who don't pursue when their absence is tested, create a magnetic field of uncertainty. The human mind can't stand emotional gaps. It needs to fill them. When you don't deliver obvious reactions, the other person loses themselves in hypotheses. This vacuum generates more dependence than any display of affection. Your rarity becomes value. Your indifference becomes silent punishment. Your presence, when offered, becomes a rare prize. In the digital world, where everything is immediacy and reaction, its strength lies in delay and absence. An attack loses its meaning when it finds no response. The court of public opinion feeds on the desperation of the accused to defend themselves. If you refuse to play the role, the show dies. To ignore is to reframe. It's to expose other people's hysteria without having to lift a finger. When you control the timing of the response, you also control the pace of the narrative. And in the virtual space, time is power. The tools to sustain this state are simple, but they require inner strength. Calibrated silence is not eternal muteness, but the pause that forces the other to reveal themselves. Non-reaction is not weakness, but mastery over one's impulses. Calculated indifference is not genuine disinterest, but a strategic refusal to engage in small games. Rare presence makes you something more than human. It makes you an enigma. Surgical pauses transform any response into a sentence. Redirection avoids direct confrontation and forces others to fight among themselves. Strategic disappearance breaks cycles of dependence and forces others to recalculate their importance. The internal metamorphosis that accompanies these practices is not easy. You'll notice the initial discomfort of not reacting, as if something were incomplete. This is a reflexive addiction. The mind trained to seek approval goes into withdrawal, but as you cross this void, you discover strength. You begin to realize that those who shout the loudest are those who control the least, that those who explain the most are those who have the least power, that those who show the most are those who wear themselves out the most. The discipline of remaining unreadable requires emotional iron, but it is precisely this iron that builds the untouchable aura. No one can hold you back, break you or stop you, because there are no longer any visible footholds for others to exploit. What they cannot see, they cannot manipulate. What they cannot measure, they cannot contain. Your strength lies not in imposing yourself violently, but in becoming rarefied, enigmatic, and unattainable. It is in this silence, full of intentions, that the power others call shadowy is consolidated. And when you begin to understand this, the question that echoes deep within arises: how far are you willing to carry this weight without giving in to the need to be read, accepted, or loved? The answer to this question opens the next layer of transformation. The instinct to fill the void is what imprisons most people. You feel the pressure growing in the silence, the urgency to respond, the discomfort of not being understood. But this urgency is the shackle. It's the reflex trained by the world to keep you predictable and manipulable. By resisting, you discover that sustained tension is not weakness, but ammunition. The longer you hold back the impulse, the more others squirm at your lack of response. The hidden mechanism repeats itself in all social arenas. People seek consistency because it is the basis of trust. But in power games, trust is vulnerability. If everyone knows how you will react, you are already framed. Predictability is an invisible prison sentence. Real freedom requires apparent contradiction, requires control so solid that you can decide when to be predictable and when to become an enigma. The dismantling of innocence occurs when you realize that seeking explanations is not an act of clarity but of dependence. Explaining yourself always signals that you need to be understood. The problem is that by exposing yourself like this, you place yourself in an inferior position. Those who demand explanations already have an advantage, as they force you to justify yourself. Silence in this context is not empty. It is a refusal to accept the other person's premise. It is a refusal to play the game on a board that you did not choose. In the professional environment, this dynamic is lethal. Imagine the weight of someone who never rushes to respond, but observes. The figure who doesn't make excuses, but lets others waste energy trying to guess their intentions. When it's their turn to speak, each word carries double weight because it's not overly diluted. Public remarks don't resonate if you don't acknowledge them. Criticism dies on its own if you don't quickly counter them. Credit, sooner or later, falls to those who remain unwavering, because time rewards solid presence and punishes anxiety. In the relational sphere, power games are more subtle. Emotional tests are thrown like hooks, waiting for your immediate reaction. If you get angry, you give in. If you try to prove yourself, you lose. But if you remain cold, if you let the other person drown in their own expectations, the balance shifts. Calculated absence is a punishment more severe than any words. A mind that receives no response creates its own tortures. Your coldness in this context is not disinterest, but a mirror that reflects back to the other person their own fears. In the digital realm, where everything is fast, your slowness is revolution. When a label is thrown at you and you don't address it, the game falls apart. Whoever needs to explain has already lost. The public quickly tires of those who beg for validation. But the figure who remains silent, who shows no rush to defend themselves, who keeps the mystery intact, becomes a fixed point amidst the noise. The attack becomes a hollow echo. Silence becomes the dominant narrative. The tools that sustain this state are sharp and specific. Calibrated silence creates fissures in the other's mind, who seeks to fill the absence with their own fantasies. Non-reaction becomes a mirror of impotence for those who tried to provoke you. Calculated indifference reorganizes the invisible hierarchy of who needs whom. Your rare presence acquires an aura of magnetism. Surgical pauses lend weight that no lengthy speech could. Mirroring extracts without exposing. Redirection makes the attack lose direction. Strategic disappearance breaks patterns of dependency, and unpredictability ensures that no one is ever sure where to find you. The internal transformation necessary to sustain this is not easy. It requires curbing the desire for recognition, resisting the temptation to fill silences, and accepting the solitude that comes with autonomy. This solitude, however, is fertile ground. In it arises the clarity that separates the strong from the fragile. You cease to be conditioned by the gaze of others and begin to shape the environment around you. What was once weakness becomes a weapon. What was once silence becomes command. What was once absence becomes a multiplied presence. It's at this point that the phrase resonates: no one can hold you back, break you, or stop you. Not because you impose yourself with noise, but because you dominate the game in a space where others don't know how to operate. The void. The fortress is invisible, but unbreakable, and those who try to cross it become lost in their own mental labyrinths. But there's still a deeper layer, turning this aura into a practical tool, not just a defense. The next step is to use your unreadability not only to protect yourself, but to guide the game toward what you want. The paradox is simple and brutal. The less you do, the more you control. This is the point few can bear to see. They have been trained to believe that power is movement, constant action, visible demonstration. But true power arises in contrast, the impact of what you withhold, what you don't give, what you choose to deny to the environment. Silence, when conscious, is more deafening than 1,000 words. The hidden mechanism here is the collective addiction to predictability and noise. Society teaches that being present means speaking, reacting, and showing up. But this overexposure is a trap. Every miscalculated word is a loophole. Every impulsive reaction is a point of manipulation. Excess reveals weakness. Scarcity creates value. Those who speak little but with intention accumulate authority. Those who remain silent in the face of attack accumulate mystery. Those who are absent at the right moment accumulate weight. The dismantling of innocence arises when you realize that absolute clarity is a burden that only serves others. Total transparency is exposure. It's giving free ammunition to those who, sooner or later, will use it against you. The world doesn't reward those who open up, but those who know how to close doors. The secret, the unsaid, the sustained pause. All of this is invisible currency that only the attentive know how to accumulate. In the professional environment, this principle shapes entire careers. A leader who overexposes every detail loses respect. A collaborator who speaks without a filter loses credibility. But those who control what they reveal, and when they reveal it, become indispensable. Silence in a meeting followed by a short, precise sentence can reverse an entire decision. Indirect remarks against you, when ignored, backfire. Political credit doesn't go to those who react quickly, but to those who maintain calm until time itself exposes the fragility of others. In the relational sphere, asymmetry is established by managing presence. Those who are always available lose value. Those who are always reactive lose respect. But those who moderate their presence, those who don't respond immediately, those who leave intentional gaps, create magnetism. The other becomes dependent on their attention precisely because it doesn't come easily. Their absence acts as an invisible punishment, and their presence, when offered, is celebrated as an achievement. This asymmetry doesn't require words, only the discipline of not giving in to the reflex of always being accessible. In the digital space, logic is even more brutal. The constant noise swallows those who try to defend themselves, explain, justify. The crowd feeds on emotional blood. The more someone reacts, the more fragile they appear. But those who refuse to dance to the imposed rhythm, who are in no hurry to respond, who let the noise tire them out, dominate the game. The court of public opinion is ravenous, but also volatile. Sustained silence transforms hysteria into emptiness. The tools of this discipline are well known, but few practice them. Calibrated silence forces the other to reveal themselves. Failure to react causes the attack to backfire on the initiator. Calculated indifference destabilizes because it denies the other validation of their importance. Rare presence creates an air of myth, something that transcends the ordinary human. Surgical pauses transform short phrases into definitive sentences. Mirroring extracts secrets without exposing one's own. Redirection shifts the energy of an attack without having to confront it directly. Strategic disappearance breaks patterns of dependency and forces others to recalculate their position. Unpredictability ensures that no one ever knows what to expect, and that is power in its purest form. Internal metamorphosis is inevitable. You'll begin to notice the difference between acting reflexively and acting by choice. You'll notice that each time you give in to the need to be understood, you surrender control. And each time you sustain the tension of silence, you regain sovereignty. This process isn't comfortable. The withdrawal from validation is real. But the strength born from this discomfort is the same one that makes you untouchable. No one can hold you back, break you, or stop you, because you no longer move according to someone else's reflection. You are no longer conditioned. Now you are the one who conditions you. Absence has become a weapon. Silence has become presence. Indifference has become power. Others scramble to read you, but find only broken mirrors. What is not revealed cannot be manipulated. What is not said cannot be distorted. But there's an even more acute stage, using this discipline not just to resist, but to create. It's time to transform your aura into an active force, not just a defensive one. The final layer is the darkest, because it's where you begin to guide others without them realizing they're being guided. Real power is never noisy. It settles like a shadow, discreet, and by the time others notice, they're already moving to the rhythm you imposed without saying a word. This is the ultimate metamorphosis. Not just resisting, but leading. Not just being unreadable, but becoming the silent reference point that reorganizes the game around you. The hidden mechanism here is the human hunger for direction. Most people can't stand living in a vacuum. They need clues, someone to show them the way, even indirectly. When you sustain your presence without explanations, without justifications, without haste, the very absence of clarity becomes a compass. They begin to interpret your pauses as intentions, your silences as messages, your absences as strategic moves. And indeed they are. The difference is that you now control the meanings, not them. The dismantling of innocence is complete when you accept that you shouldn't be transparent, but enigmatic. The quest to be understood is a childish illusion. Respect isn't born from absolute clarity, but from the opacity that breeds reverence. People revere what they can't measure. What is predictable is exploited. What is illegible is feared. And as the Florentine said, in other words, it is better to be subtly feared than to be dependently loved. In the professional arena, this mastery becomes a tool for advancement. Those who don't rush into responses, but instead deliver short, strategic observations, become a benchmark. Every pause you sustain forces others to fill the space with their own insecurity. And in the end, your word carries the weight of the decision, even if it's spoken in a few sentences. When you control the tempo, you also control the narrative. It's in this space that alliances are made, and enemies reveal themselves, not because you attacked them, but because you let them expose themselves. In personal relationships, the effect is visceral. Absence is not just punishment, but a framework. Your coldness establishes an asymmetry that others cannot reverse. They begin to measure your presence as if it were a luxury, and your every gesture, no matter how small, begins to be interpreted as valuable. Magnetism is born of rarity. Your aura grows as you refuse to be accessible. The prize is not being loved with noisy intensity, but being remembered in the silence of those who cannot forget you. In the digital space, where everything is immediate, you become an anomaly. The online game is sustained by the rush to react. Those who delay, those who don't hurry, those who don't defend themselves, disconcert the court. Your slowness, your silence, your refusal to dance to the imposed rhythm expose the fragility of the collective noise. You don't fight the attack, you let it starve to death. And in the process, your figure becomes even more intriguing. The tools that support this final layer require steely discipline. Calibrated silence now serves not only to protect oneself, but to induce interpretations. Non-reaction is not just a refusal, it's a trap. Calculated indifference breeds attraction. Rare presence becomes a myth. Surgical pauses become commands. Mirroring makes the other person expose themselves without realizing it. Redirection transforms attacks into confessions. Strategic disappearance becomes a silent warning. Unpredictability ensures that no one is ever sure of you, and this uncertainty is an invisible current that keeps everyone in orbit. The internal metamorphosis that sustains this is definitive. You no longer seek acceptance, no longer fear incomprehension. You've accepted strategic solitude as the price of sovereignty. You've discovered that you don't need to shout to dominate. You don't need to explain to be heard. You don't need to show yourself to be remembered. You've become a fortress, cold, silent, untouchable. Clarity lies within you, not in the reflection of others. And so the cycle closes. The doubt sown at the beginning finds its resolution. No one can hold you back, break you, or stop you, because there is no longer any control over you. What is visible is under your command, and what is invisible is indecipherable. Your strength lies in the space you sustain, the silence you impose, the aura you have built. You have ceased to be a predictable piece and have become a hidden player. Power is no longer about reacting, but about creating the field in which everyone else reacts. This is the Dark Pact, accepting that the weight of sovereignty demands sacrifice, but grants something that noise will never have: untouchability. Now, with this understanding sealed, you can mark your silent presence with a phrase that needs no explanation, just affirmation. My absence rules the game.